So I look to guys like Brian Scrutland and Mike Keane and the way they played the game as to a way I could get myself out of the AHL and into the NHL by competing hard defensively, being a good penalty killer, winning faceoffs, just being reliable in all areas of the game. And I knew I wasn't going to score 40-50 goals in pro, so I had to adapt and find a way to move myself up to the next level. And it was from watching guys that cup winners that in Mike Keane and Brian Scrutland that helped me kind of mold my game around the way they played so I could move up.
That was Clark Wilm, NHL veteran of 455 games played, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and we are here to talk to Clark Wilm today. Clark Wilm is a 1976 born, just like your host, former NHL player from Central Butte, Saskatchewan. He was a sixth rounder to the Calgary Flames, 150th overall in the 1995 entry draft. And he was a former Saskatoon Blade, played 4 years with the Blades, was part of a 1995-96 Saskatoon Blades line that included Mark Dial and Frank Banham. Mark Dial, Frank Banham, and Clark Wilm was one of the most productive lines ever put together in WHL history. Clark with 49 goals himself that year. Frankie Banham had 83, and I think Mark Dial had over 50, maybe 60. And they were lethal together. They all filled a piece of the puzzle there. Clark was the guy that would go to the net as we talk about and get the puck out of the corners and maybe fight from time to time. And Mark Dial was the playmaking center that had the puck on his stick most of the time and would find either Clark or Frankie. And Frankie was the speedster and the guy that had the wicked release and the great shot. And combined they put the puck in the net a lot. So we talk about that a little bit. Clark also went on to play with St. John's Flames, which was the AHL affiliate for the Calgary Flames. Played there for 2 years before getting the call to the NHL, where he stuck for 5 straight seasons, essentially. Ended up playing with the Calgary Flames, Nashville Predators, and Toronto Maple Leafs. Went overseas to Jokerit in Helsinki, Finland, and then to the DEL in Germany. In our conversation, we don't get to his time overseas, as we focus mostly on his journey into the NHL, and then also just about where he's at today with his boys as a hockey coach, and the development aspect of players, and where he sees some advantages and disadvantages, as well as the advantages of being on the farm and growing up on the farm. It's crazy, which I touch on here in the discussion about the percentage of players that go to the NHL that are from Saskatchewan, Canada, a province of 1 million people that keeps producing NHL talent at a per capita rate that is that nobody touches. It's pretty impressive, and so Clark helped those numbers, and it was awesome to get to talk to him. We actually connected because of his son, who is 2012 in Saskatchewan, who's a heck of a good player, and I invited him to my UMH 68 Invitational. It's going to be in Martinsville there, and so we had an opportunity to connect. And I said, "Hey, it would be great to get you on the pod," and he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So, anyways, that's how it goes sometimes. We serendipitous moments. Hopefully, I think it sounds like they're going to be coming to the UMH 68, which is fantastic. And it was great for me to get connect with Clark, because we had not so many battles in the WHL necessarily, because they were in the other division, but we definitely actually ran into each other a few times when he was playing with St. John's, and I was with the Baby Leafs. So, we'll leave it at that. Let's get into the conversation with Clark Wilm. All right. Well, welcome to the program all the way from Saskatchewan. What part of the world are you in right now, actually?
Right now I'm actually at work here. I work in Davidson for John Deere Ag company called Western Sales. I've been doing that 8 or 9 years now. So
in Davidson?
In Davidson, yeah. I live up in Saskatoon, though. So
all right. Well, from Saskatoon at Davidson, Saskatchewan. Welcome to the program, Clark Wilm.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be on.
Great to see you, man. I saw from your DB Central Butte, Saskatchewan. I can't say I know where that is or how big that is. Is that a fairly small place?
Yeah, it's a small farming community. So it's a couple hours south of Saskatoon. So I grew up on a farm there, and parents still live there. Brother still farms. So it's 400 or 500 people live there, just a small farming community in Saskatchewan. So there's lots of them.
That's fantastic. Is that where you played your minor?
I did, yeah. So, we're the same age. So I played minor hockey there right up till I was in Bantam. And then I left to Saskatoon to play AAA. But other than that, I just played in a small town.
That's awesome. Are you the only NHL alumni from Central Butte?
Believe it or not, growing up, there was Mark Smith was a year younger than me. So he San Jose, Calgary played quite a bit. So there was actually two of us that came out of there that played together as kids.
That's fantastic. It never ceases to amaze me when I see the stats on that, like Saskatchewan itself, as the population of Saskatchewan, like about 1 million people, if I'm not mistaken. And the percentage of hockey players that come out of there to go on to play pro is astounding.
Yeah, I think it probably has a lot to do with just the availability in small towns to be on the ice all the time. The rinks are open, so if you're a young kid that loves hockey, you can be on the ice as much as you want. So it's pretty cool that we've got so many hockey players coming out of Saskatchewan for how small it is. But yeah, guys, and a lot of the time it's -40 here too, so you want to be inside on the ice, not outside freezing.
Yeah, right. Do you see any other correlation to that? I mean, you mentioned you grew up in a small farming community on a farm. From us city slickers out west, it's like, that farm boy strength or farm boy mentality. Do you think that correlates as well, like something to do with the mindset of the progress that the players make there?
100%. I think just for myself, growing up on a farm, you're asked to work at a young age, so you learn a solid work ethic and you work until the job's done. So I think that has a lot to do with the way guys grow up in hockey. Like, I think there's no secret that guys from Saskatchewan are usually pretty tough and compete hard and are hard-nosed players for the most part. And I think that has a lot to do with just the way kids are brought up here, that you're expected to help out on the farm if you're a farm boy. And that's just the way it is growing up.
Does that still hold true, do you feel, in like 2025?
I think so. Yeah, I think obviously in small towns, hockey, you got to leave a little bit earlier. So kids are probably taken off in U13. But the kids that grow up in small towns and on farms, they're expected to work and they're expected to help out. And you learn that work ethic at a young age.
I love that. Since we're on it, you talk about leaving. I'm drawn to the Saskatchewan model just because we've, with what I do, and I have a ton of conversations, and with the CSSHL and AAA here, and the different programs. I mean, there's a million options, and all of them are very, very expensive here in the West. When it comes to the Saskatchewan model, I mean, you've gone with the AA route. I think you can slap whatever number of A's you want on that, but your top players play at this AA level. Now, I guess if you said AAA, maybe the draw zone would widen a little bit, so maybe there'd be less AA teams would maybe be the only difference. But that model seems to go really well, and Saskatchewan seems to have just adopted it. And we're not worried about private leagues. We're not worried about CSSHL teams. Like, how is the mindset of Saskatchewan maybe different from outside of that province?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we're very fortunate that we have stuck to our minor hockey system here, and the leagues are very competitive. When we call it whatever U15 AA or U13 AA, like when we play teams from out of province, for the most part, we're very competitive. So, and I would say our U18 AAA league is one of the best ones in Western Canada. We're fortunate that we get the majority of our players from Saskatchewan stay in and play in our leagues here. So we do have some that obviously go to academies, but the majority of our players choose to stay and play in the Saskatchewan leagues. So we're fortunate that way that we can have very competitive leagues and keep most of our kids here.
So you mentioned you have your oldest is how old?
He is 16.
16. Okay, and that was an 08, you said, right?
08, yeah. So
an 08 born, playing U18. Your youngest is a 2012. You've been obviously involved in all three of them. What is Saskatchewan doing right there? Do you think? Like, why is it competitive? Why do people stay? Maybe we can start with the price. Like, if you don't mind sharing, like, what does it cost to play U18, AA or AAA hockey there in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, U18 AAA, you're probably around that 10 grand. So it's very reasonable for the amount of ice time and the amount of the way programs are run. So yeah. I think for the most part in the U18, like, we've got a very good league here, and it shows once we go out and we play outside of our province that our top teams are very competitive and have a good chance to win. So I think that helps to keep kids around too, that they know that if they are playing in the U18 AAA league, it's a very competitive league, and it produces a lot of very good hockey players.
Right. And so that is like you having paid coaches at U18 level, right? All the programs have paid coaches.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm sure there's something, but it's not. I don't know any of those details like that.
Right. Travel's included though in that 10,000. Like the kids go on a bus to out of town games.
Yeah, they bus everywhere. So it's bus and hotels and stuff. So it's very reasonable. We're super lucky in Saskatchewan to have the availability.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, and just for perspective, right? So like our draw area here is in Kelowna. So I mean, whatever, it's 45 minutes to the rink. It's not the end of the world. But it's a drive, and the good practice times, I think, like they practice 4 times a week or whatever, and travel is included in the program. But you're looking more at like $20,000 for like, that's essentially U15, U17, or U18 is all around that number. So like twice as much. And I mean, I'm not into the budget line. Like I can't speak to where the money's going, but it does. I mean, with me, I have 3, right? If they're all playing AAA, that's $60,000, right? Like that's not inexpensive. So it's kind of interesting. I do like that model because I have heard that you guys are doing it right there, and one of the big reasons why people stick around. So that's awesome. Let's shift gears though. I want to talk about that game last night a little bit before I assume you watched it, Canada US.
Oh yeah, for sure, loved it.
What'd you think?
I thought it was a great game. Like the intensity was there. The building would have been electric. Like I can't imagine those guys skating out, goosebumps all over, and just. It was great to see all those super high-end skilled players competing as hard as they did. Like I'm excited for the Olympics next year. That's going to be awesome.
What do you think that says about our sport? Just in general, like the fact that I'll maybe preface like the idea here, it was essentially an exhibition, right? It was a made-up tournament. Like the 4 nations, the trophy they held up, nobody had ever seen it before. You know what I mean? So obviously, like the event wasn't really anything, but obviously what brought out and what was on the line did mean something to these millionaire hockey players, right? Like I think that's a real statement to who is playing our game. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think the players that were in it did an unreal job. I didn't know what to expect, but obviously there's a lot of you look at those 4 nations, and Sweden and Finland are rival nations, and obviously Canada and US. So like there's a lot of pride in all those countries. And when you had those 4 teams there, you knew everybody wants to win. Like it doesn't matter if it's in February and it's kind of a made up trophy, like you said, like you're playing Canada, US. Canada wants to win, and so does US. So there's bragging rights there, and it was a lot of fun to watch how hard those guys competed.
Yeah, it totally was. What really impressed me at the end of the day, like I thought that like the final game last night, the first 10 minutes I was like so ecstatically fast that it was almost too fast for how skilled those guys even are. You know, like it was so fast. Like everyone was doing everything at 100%. Game settled in a little bit, but I was just impressed with the defending. You know, like the defending of even like the forwards and the D that are all, you know, those are all top end offensive D men in the NHL. Like everyone was above pucks, taking away time and space. Like I just thought it was incredibly well defended, which I didn't really necessarily expect.
No, me neither, really. But yeah, there was times where you've got Connor McDavid coming with the puck and dumping it in. Like, how much do you see that? So you could tell like there was nobody wanted to be that guy that turned that puck over to have an odd man rush the other way. So those guys defensively, you know, were working as hard as they could and putting pucks in a position where they weren't going to have an opportunity for an odd man rush coming back the other way. So like when you see guys like that coming up to the blue line, having nothing and putting the puck in and going to get it, it just tells you how much the defensive side of the game in big games really matters.
Yeah. What was your takeaway from the first time they played in the three scraps in 9 seconds? How did that make you feel?
I couldn't see it live, but I know my older boy was texting me and just saying this atmosphere is electric. So it unfortunately I didn't see it live, but I'm not surprised the Kachuk boys wanted to get things started early, and that just set the tone for the tournament, in my opinion. That you know what, we're not here for funsies. We're here to win, and we're here to make a statement. So it was awesome to see, in my opinion.
I mean, that was a total statement. And the thing is, like, the only thing, like, being a Canadian and, you know, having worn the Canadian jersey, like, I love the way, like, what a fight. Hagel and Tkachuk, the first one, was off the charts. But they all three of them were really inspired by the U.S. players, which, like, you know, that wouldn't have happened 20 years ago. That would have been Canada, you mean, initiating, right? Maybe U.S. Reciprocating. But I just thought that was interesting. Like even that mentality, that mind shift. I always thought that we kind of had that little bit of that advantage from the grit side of things, you know, in our approach to the game. And I was just like, wow, like blue's coming at red right now, and we're having to say yes to them. But I mean, either way, I mean, it was an awesome start, and obviously both teams were up for it.
Oh, exactly. And I think the Kachuk boys are kind of unicorns right now. So it's not surprising to see the way they play to want to get things started off that way. And, you know, the teams were built a little bit differently, but, you know, Hagel and Bennett and Barenko, they were a game. They said, all right, let's go. So it was, they stepped up, and it was awesome to see.
Brady was hard to handle, hey, for us, boy. Like he was a moose. That guy is a big body and hard to handle in those scenarios. I thought he really, I mean, he's not the fastest guy, obviously, but boy, was he effective, right? Like he figured out how to play it at that pace. And you're right, those guys are unicorns. And maybe that's a good shift to you, Clarky, and your career. Not that you were a unicorn at the time, but you mean a smaller guy that played super hard and had enough skill to put the puck in the net too. I think that you probably really relate to those guys, you know, and the style and to see that at that level, that there's still a place for some of that in the game, probably made you smile a little bit, I assume.
Oh, for sure. I think, yeah, 100%. There's still, that's a lot of the fighting's out of the game, which rightly so, but there is definitely, there's definitely a place for guys that go to the net hard and want to score in those hard areas. I think, you know, youth hockey wise, we spend a lot of time on skills work and rightly so. But I think those kids that go hard to the paint and want to battle and finish their checks hard, I think they're still very sought after for teams, because you know, Brady, him forechecking and just crushing D-men, that makes the D-men, doesn't matter who you are, how skilled you are. If you got a guy coming on you hard to finish your check hard, you're moving the puck quicker. So you know, I think there's still a huge part of that in the game, and you can see with the Panthers last year winning the cup. Like, they're just a hard team to play against. So, I don't know if it's ever really left, but I think now it's kind of coming back where they're looking for guys that will do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think, I mean, I don't know, from my perspective, I think they are a bit harder to find potentially, like which I think is a good thing for the players that want to do it. And I also think it's a good thing for what I do and like talking to players about the choices and the development they can make within their own game, right? Like go to that far post, hang out around the blue paint, finish your checks. Like it seems like some are less willing to do that than maybe they were prior. And it's a great way to be able to, differentiate yourself from the crowd in this day and age.
Yeah, 100%. It's tough to do. You go to the front of the net, you're going to get hit with a puck. You're probably going to get cross-checked. It's not an easy place to play, but that's where the goals are scored. You look at the goals last night, like they're kind of right in front of that net for the most part. And I think probably some of that has to do with, social media. All these kids are watching short clips of guys dangling guys and going end to end. There's not very many clips on social media of some guy crashing the net and banging in a rebound. So I think a lot of, TikTok and whatever else that for the most part, kids pay attention to, they're on that lot. So it caters to the more skilled toe drags and dangling end to end, which, happens during games, but not a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, for sure. How does that affect you and your coaching style? Because you said you were U13 head coach of your younger boy, and that is, I think it is a little bit of a disease, let's call it, right? Because they're growing up in the highlight world, whether it's Sportsnet or whether it's TSN or whether it's their social media devices of what you just said there. They're watching these short form things of these guys doing amazing individual efforts. Yet we both know in a team environment, it's much better to use people. It's much better to have the puck move, right? Move quickly. And especially as you move up in the age levels, that becomes a much more, desired or actually necessary skill set. How do you handle that? Maybe like what their perception of success is and what you think the team perception of success is.
I try to get kids to watch games and, pay attention to, it's awesome to watch Connor McDavid dangle end to end, but pay attention to that guy that's on the third line that's making the good hard plays on the wall like that, and forechecking hard and doing the little things that aren't as flashy, because I think that's a huge part of the game. Which like I said last night, you look at all those guys with how skilled they were. They defaulted back to we're gonna play a grinding game and put pucks in and go get it. Not that that's the only way to play, but I think it's important for kids to watch full games and pay attention to not only the top guys playing, but those guys on the second, third, and fourth line, and just see what they do to be successful.
Yeah, and to stay in the league for sure. Yeah, I thought the exits were amazing last night. I mean, how rarely they weren't screwed up, for lack of a better word. Like there was one in the first period. I remember Marner made a missed pass on the wall, and it was like a big time scoring chance for US like 10 minutes in. And then I was, as a former winger, I was just watching the board play there. And I mean, under immense amounts of pressure, right? Like what to do with it, when to chip it. Do you find the triangle and to put an area pass to your center, or do you go cross ice with it if you have time? Like it was just, those things can be very underappreciated at a younger level. And then you go at that stage there, in those moments, and those are high skill plays that you wouldn't necessarily qualify as skill play, from what you see on TikTok, let's say.
No, exactly. And that's a huge portion of the game, and where the game is played is those little plays along the wall and little passes, like you said. And it's, I think it's very important for kids to watch that in games and try to recognize what guys are doing with the puck when they get it along the wall, in the middle of the ice, where they're placing pucks, and just the details of the game that aren't, like you said, maybe they're not deemed skill plays, but they're a huge portion of the game and the difference between winning and losing.
How about you? So, played 4 years in Saskatoon. successful years too. You mean you're on one of the most dynamic lines. It's funny now that I have you on. I've had the whole trio on. So
Oh,
Frankie's
nice.
been on, and Diesel's been on, and anyways, and now yourself. I mean, that line was, was really kind of an epic type of a line that year, and for all of WHL history. I don't have the stats in front of me. Maybe you would remember, but I think Frankie had like over 70 goals and some like 160 points, and Mark Dayal had around the same amount, and yourself had 110 and one away from 50. Pretty wild experience there. Maybe speak to your journey through the WHL and your development as a player and getting into that fourth season where you had such a career year.
Yeah. I was probably a little naive, like back in the early 90s when we started. There wasn't, I actually didn't even know about the WHL draft at the time. So I just knew I wanted to play hockey, and, I was a big Moose Jaw Warriors fan back in the day. And then I was fortunate to get drafted by the Blades, and remember talking to the GM, Daryl Lubanicki. He came down and said, "We'd like you to come play for the AAA Blazers next year." So yeah, I said, perfect. Really had no clue what that was at the time. Like, I didn't know what AAA hockey was. So,
yeah.
And then pretty fortunate too. You, as a young kid moving away from home, you meet some lifelong buddies like Rhett Warner, him, and Chad Allen, and we kind of came up together the whole time there. So you meet great guys along the way that make everything easier. So it's, we have great relationships to this day. So, but yeah, like I moved to Saskatoon and went to a school that had 12 or 1300 people in it. So I was just a culture shock. I came from a town of 500, and all of a sudden you're in a school that's got 3 times as many people. So it was an adjustment to say the least. But again, I was lucky. My older brother moved up at the same time, so that obviously helped. You had some familiarity there with home and everything, and my parents being an hour and a half south of the city, it's easy to come and watch hockey, which back then you don't maybe realize how nice that is to play so close to home. But looking back now, it was lucky to be not far from home to play my whole junior career. So, right. And we had a great team in AAA. We actually won the league here. So, and then again, moving on to the Blades with the year before I played, they lost to Kamloops in Game 7. So it was a great organization and a great time to be a Blade and move in, and played as a 16-year-old. And as you know, the WHL as a 16-year-old is can be tough at times. There's some back then. There was some scary players playing that you had to be very aware of who was on the ice and what was going on. So I think that kind of definitely helped out as I moved along in my career. Just the spatial awareness of who's on the ice and how to make plays. And then, yeah, we had a great team, and I think for 3 of my 4 years, it was pretty much the same guys. We had the same core of 10, 11, 12 guys on the team. So, it was a special time to be a Blade, and obviously winning helps too. So, yeah.
So it was you, Chad and Warnsey, Rhett Warner, that were the 16-year-olds there. You're when you were 16.
Yeah, and then Frankie was a 17-year-old, and then the next year Dayal came in. So yeah, to touch on Frankie and Mark, like I was lucky enough to play the majority of my time in Saskatoon with Frank, and just an amazing player. Like that last year, he had 83 goals and just scoring at will, and it. To be able to watch a guy like that and the way he shoots the puck, and then Mark, the way he carried the puck and set plays up was, it was awesome to be part of.
One of the things I like to talk about, and I think that is super important for players, is figuring out mean, I guess player identity is the way it gets described most of the time, right? Like who you are, what you're good at, how to be valuable to the team, and then if you want to make it even more of a microcosm, how do you be valuable to your line? I think guys struggle with that. You know, I mean, recognizing what their strengths are and maybe what their weaknesses are, and how to provide value on a consistent basis. Can you speak to maybe that line and what your piece of the puzzle was with that to help make those guys successful, and also the success you had, and maybe some thoughts about player identity in general?
Yeah, for sure. Just on that line, I was there to go get the puck and crash the net and be physical and open up space for those guys, and just getting in hard on the forecheck, crashing and banging and battling in front of the net was kind of what I was there for. And you get in that position and you move the puck to highly skilled guys and get open, they'll find you. So you're going to have success along the way in that. And it's I think I think as far as like long line combinations, it's we had a passer, a shooter, and we had a guy that would go get the puck and give it to him. So I think you kind of have everything you need there to be successful. So
right. So did you have any, like, were you told to do that? Meaning like that style of play, like or is that just like in you felt that was, you knew that's where you were valuable and that's what you felt very comfortable doing?
Yeah, I knew that was my game, like to be physical and get in the odd fight every now and then and create some space. That was just the game that I was comfortable with. And I found when I played that way, I had the most success. I knew I wasn't going to dangle my way to the next level or toe drag my way to the next level. I had to compete, and I had to find a way to earn more ice time through the way I competed on the ice, the way I battled in front of the net, and just sticking up for teammates when it needed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Of the 49 that year, I'm not asking you to recall all of them, but were you're speaking about guys willing to go to the crease and guys willing to go to the hard areas. Were a lot of your goals kind of Hyman style, like around that blue paint area?
Yeah, actually, we had our year-end banquet, and our video guy was putting clips together. He goes, I couldn't find a goal that you scored outside of 10 feet from the net. He said everything was just right in front of the net. I said, well, yeah, that's probably right. Maybe I shot an empty netter in, but I knew that's where I had to go to be successful. So I went there and found pucks and banged them in from a short distance. But it's probably an end in there somewhere, but he just couldn't find it.
But you know what though? But like, God, isn't there a lesson there? Like, that's the thing is like they all count the same. Like, and those are awesome goals, right? It's like, but someone's got to be willing to go there and go find them, and especially, I mean, I guess you were in a bit of a special scenario with Diesel and with Bantam there, because there was going to be a lot pucks lying around that area, right? You knew that it was going to go there, but still, I mean, someone's got to want to be willing to, and I think that Hyman is such a great example of that. And he's not having the year he had, last year, but he's still having a good year, really solid year. And I think his game, like, is replicable. Let's say it, like not everybody can, like as you said, be Connor McDavid and fly down the wing at Mach 8 and toe drag everybody. But, I mean, players can choose to go to the net and to find the angle of their stick and to get body position on defensemen and so on and so forth. Right. I think that area of the game, like those goals, are teachable and learnable and applicable, and there's goals to be had there. So how much of your craft did you like think about with tips and with body position? And was that something that you like consciously worked on during your time as a pro?
Yeah, for sure. And to touch on that. So you remember what it was like in the early 90s, like in the AHL, it was a gong show at times. So I remember my first year, I think I had, 10 or 11 fights in the first 9 games. And when you do that, it's like, well, then you got guys like Big Jerry Fleming and guys looking for you. So in my mind, I'm like, this is not what I want my pro career to be. So I look to, guys like Brian Scrudland and Mike Keane and the way they played the game as to a way I could get myself out of the AHL and into the NHL by, competing hard defensively, being a good penalty killer, winning faceoffs, just being reliable in all areas of the game. And, I knew I wasn't going to score 40, 50 goals in pro. So I had to adapt and find a way to move myself up to the next level. And it was from watching guys that, cup winners that, in Mike Keane and Brian Scrudland that helped me kind of mold my.
It's going to take one short break from the podcast here, discussion, to give a shout out to UMH68 potential for sponsorship. Now, what does that mean? Well, my main sponsor, I'm looking for one main sponsor in each province or one title sponsor right now. We are having discussions with a few different companies that are aligned in the space and could make great partners, but nothing's been ratified yet. So I thought I would use the podcast as an opportunity. I know there's a lot of business people that listen to this who have people in hockey. And the idea here would be able to give back to an event and the players in it in a way that you can feel good about. One of the things that I don't want people to have to do is to say no to the UMH68 Invitational because of financial restrictions. I know how expensive hockey is. I know it's a problem that we have with our sport, and the truth of the matter is, the event is an expensive one to put on. So for the most part, it is on the the checkbooks of the players coming to make it happen. Now, last year, I was able to have a corporate sponsor that was able to offer scholarships to players that weren't able to make it otherwise. And whether that was in the form of of some type of a percentage discount off the player fees. So that's a really awesome thing to be involved in as a company, to be able to give back and to see your name in the email saying that, for instance, last year was Iron Gross Construction. Iron Gross Construction got quite a few emails in BC from thankful families saying thank you to Iron Gross for allowing us to come, and it's a real feel good way to be able to be involved in the grassroots idea of the game, being able to support up and coming players that want to be hockey players and not just play hockey, and to pursue a potential career in it, whether that be to get paid for it one day or maybe to make the WHL level or to go to NCAA or whatever it is they want to do. But these players are all aspiring players, and the event itself, the UMH68, is just a fantastic experience in and of itself. But the whole idea is to develop these players, to give them insight and education into how to be their best and to how to progress through the sport and how to navigate it, not only for them but for their parents. So I really do feel it's a little bit of a curriculum aspect to it that I want all players to attend. If they were good enough and if they prove themselves in the season to deserve an invite, I really don't want any reason other than their own schedules to be a declining reason. So yes, if you are a sponsor out there, if you would like to get involved at a provincial level or at a essentially a Western Canadian level, to be involved in this event, I would love to partner with somebody who would like to take that headline role and to help keep player registration fees low and to be able to offer additional scholarships to players that might not otherwise be able to come. So you can get a hold of me at jason@upmyhockey.com if this is speaking to you, if there's something that you would like to partner with me on, or you can also get in touch with me through the website. So thanks for the consideration. Please don't hesitate. If it's something that feels right to you, please reach out right away, and we'd love to chat. Now let's get back to the conversation with Clark Wilm. What was a bigger challenge, adapting to the WHL, do you think, or adapting to the pro game in the AHL?
That's a good question. I look back at it now, moving to St. John, New Brunswick, when a guy's 19, 20 years old, you're kind of thrown in and say, go find an apartment and play pro hockey. So that's, that was a big adjustment, but fortunately, again, like there were some guys that I played junior with there that were there the year before, so they help out. But yeah, it's probably going to pro from junior just because you're on your own and you got to figure out, cooking food and doing all that stuff. But I was again, I was lucky. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was obviously a farmer. So there's lots of times that my brother and we had to make breakfast and get on the bus and cook supper if they weren't there, and kind of figure things out and do laundry. So it wasn't the everyday things that a guy needs to do when he's on his own. It wasn't that hard of an adjustment. So it just had to worry about some hockey.
Right. Wasn't that big of a shock. What, your first year there, going back to 16, being in Saskatoon. Now you'd already been there, like you said, a year before, so you'd been able to adjust to the to the school, kind of the culture shock of being in a bigger city. But the WHL is not midget AAA either, and a lot of guys that I've talked to is that 16-year-old year is sometimes the most challenging year of hockey for guys. Just with maybe not getting that much ice time, being in an environment that seems overwhelming, maybe a little bit homesick too. Can you speak to that? Like, was there anything for you in that year that you really remember that you had to overcome, and how you did it?
Yeah, it would probably be, not getting as much ice time as you were used to, but I think it helped too, because you try to figure out a way to get more ice time. How can I get the coach to play me more? Winning faceoffs, blocking shots, just trying to do the things that can, as a young kid, get you a little more ice time. And if you play a couple more minutes a night because you're good defensively, or you can be relied on defensively, then that adds up there. So but yeah, there was times as a 16-year-old, you're sitting on the bench for 15 minutes out of the period, and you get a shift here and there, and it can be tough. So I think it helped also having Rhett and Chad around, as they were 16 there at the same time. So and homesick wise, being up there the year before, obviously there was none of that, but it can definitely be a challenge as a young kid when you're used to playing all the time, and all of a sudden you're sitting on the bench watching.
Yeah, or even in the stands watching, right? Like sometimes that happens to guys quite a bit too. It can be a tough transition. You racked up enough penalty minutes for sure. It's funny because the year that you had like the really solid point year, you went down to 83. So obviously was, found that you're maybe more valuable on the ice than in the box, but it was still a part of your game. Like the 180 PIMs kind of 2 years in a row. Is that when you realize that you're pretty darn good at fighting, and it was a piece of your game? And how was your approach to that aspect of hockey?
Yeah, I found that I liked it. Like it, and it got a guy a little more room out there, and so yeah, it's funny. Like I went down in PIMS my last year. I'd blown my shoulder out in the playoffs, so it just wasn't even an option. I played that year with a shoulder that would pop in and out. So it was just, it wasn't, it was more of a decision. Like, I just can't do this because my shoulder will blow out and I'll end up getting pumped. But well, we're the same age. So you played back then. So like, if you had to stick up for yourself to gain respect of the opposing team and earn some space out there. So yeah, it's something I enjoy doing. And if I could, gain an edge on an opponent some way, then, I was game to do that.
Yeah, I found that, not that I had, I had 100 PIMs pretty much every year I played in junior, and it, always some fights, a handful for sure. My first year, I think, is 16 is the most I ever had. I think I had 15 fights or something as a 16-year-old. And then they went down from there. But I found myself a lot of times, which I loved about the game, was that I found myself fighting for other guys lots, like whether it was a Russian or somebody on the team that something would happen and I would get in there and do something. And then the reciprocality of that was like when something was happening to me, yeah, you do stand up for yourself, the here and there, but other guys would step in for you. Like I kind of, that was one of the ways I fell in love with kind of our game, was just like that brotherhood of, kind of going to bat for each other. And I imagine you probably felt a little bit of that responsibility with Frankie and Mark as your line mates too. Oh,
for sure. Yeah. 100%. And, yeah, back then our Blades teams were tough. So it was, you had Wade and McAllister and Rhett. And so there was, 6 or 7 guys that would go out there and try to set the tone. So it was part of our game that made us successful. We wanted to make the Sask place at the time be a tough place to play, and I think we did that most nights, and guys would stick up for each other, and epic battles against Brandon with Chris Dingman and those guys, just both top teams, and trying to get any advantage that you can. So it wasn't always fighting, but definitely sticking up for your teammates, and knowing that we weren't going to get pushed around at any time.
Yeah, that's cool. Any surprises, like from, if you look back on junior now and that Eastern Division? I mean, maybe even Frank Dial could be your answer. I mean, Frank Banham or Mark, just like with who didn't turn into the NHL player that you thought they would, or had the career that they thought that you might. Anyone stick out in that regard?
Yeah, probably Frankie. I know he when he was up in Anaheim there, he was scoring goals and had a good run there for, I can't remember how many games he played, but he was scoring goals. But then again, he had some guy named Solani that he might have to overstep to get that power play time. So I think it's tough for guys to make that jump. But I thought with the way Frankie could shoot the puck and his high end skill, he would have got more of a shot in the NHL. But I think he played pro for 25 years. He might have just retired 3 years ago. Like he had a heck of a career and just a great player. Yeah,
he played forever. How about your jump to the NHL? So I mean, you had two solid years. Again, I mean, you've already kind of positioned yourself, classified yourself as a third line kind of dependable defensive player, that can chip in. So, your stat line in St. John's doesn't jump off the sheet when it comes to, goals and assists, but they're solid years, like there's, 40 goals or 40 points in 68 games. And after that year with your 112 PIMs, you were looks like you made the team out of camp in Calgary and didn't get a call up the year before. So that's kind of an interesting transition. Usually that doesn't happen, as you know, right? Like usually there's a cup of coffee kind of here and there. They test you out, and then maybe you get your shot the next year in a full capacity. But you've made that jump right in there in 98, 99. Talk about that transition and what, if there was any communication from the Flames, and how your camp went that year.
Yeah, I think I got lucky. Like Brian Sutter was the coach, so I would say I was probably a Sutter type of player. So, over the summer, just said, come to camp and play your game, and you'll have a good chance of making it. We lost in the Calder Cup final the year before in St. John. So we had a very successful year. So, but yeah, lots of communication over the summer. Just come to camp, be in shape, and be ready to play. And then when I got to camp, just trying to do anything I could to stay there. Like I talked about before, maybe the odd fight or winning draws and blocking shots and battling hard defensively, and just trying to play a game that I could play, or I thought I could play, and impress Brian. And obviously I did. I owe obviously a huge amount of thanks to him for selecting me and keeping me around and getting my career started. But again, probably some luck came into it, just with the coach I had there and the timing I was there.
Can you speak to the mindset, of that coming into camp, and not being awestruck, or not feeling like, maybe you don't belong, or maybe it shouldn't be you, talking about doing the things required to stay there. I think that's a choice, and whether you made that consciously or not, it's a big piece, I think, of getting your foot in the door and then staying there. What are your thoughts on your mental approach to that scenario?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's no shock that the mental side of the game is huge. And, I had my mindset that I wasn't going back to the minors. I was going to have a good summer, work out, and be in the best shape I could to go to camp and play my game to make it hard for them to send me down. I wasn't, I was fully aware of what I had to do to be successful. And I just mentally focused on doing those things day in and day out that maybe they weren't super flashy, but you get in some preseason games and you do the things that you can control. And I think compete was a huge part of my game and the reason I made the NHL. So it, going into the corner with a guy who is bigger than you and battling to come out with that puck, I think is, and that was all just through mindset that I wasn't going to be denied. I was going to go in there and I was going to win the battle and stick around.
Yeah, I love hearing that, and yeah, you're discrediting yourself a little bit. I know it's the humbleness in you, like saying got a bit lucky and and a coach and this and that, but there I guess there is some truth to that. You need to be in an environment that allows you to be able to be there, right? Like the door needs to be somewhat open. You don't have to necessarily kick it down, but you obviously did the things required to get there, and then to stay there for like five seasons in a row. I want to talk a bit about the transition from Bill Stewart to Sutter because they seem to me a little bit of the same. I played for Bill in Germany when he was over there. And you talk about an old school coach. I think that he would qualify. What was your experience with Bill? And then maybe we'll contrast that with your experience with Sutter.
Yeah, I love Bill Stewart. Like, yeah, for him, he that second year in the minors, he had a huge impact on my game and gave me a lot of opportunity to grow as a player. But yeah, same thing. That you knew exactly where you stand. He wasn't afraid to give it to you if you weren't playing the way you needed to play or the way you thought you needed to play. He was. I found he was hard nosed in that, but he was fair if you showed up and you played your game and competed the way he saw the way you should, then you played lots. Like it, he gave guys a fair opportunity, and if you weren't taking shortcuts, you were rewarded. So he had a huge impact on me making that step to the NHL that next year also.
That's awesome. That's great. That's great accolades for Bill. And just his coaching style probably wasn't too far off that of Sutter's, correct?
No, not at all. Like it, both hard-nosed guys that, demanded hard work and, lots of days it wasn't easy. And I think I can fall back on my farming upbringing. Like Brian's just a farmer. Like I still talk to him to this day. And like so when he was saying things at the rink and the way he was approaching things, for me, it was like being at home. I think, probably somebody that didn't come up with that upbringing would have had a tougher time with it. But for me, it was just kind of like being back on the farm. So it worked out perfectly.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. When did you, if you can remember, like I said, you had a full season. I never got to experience that. Right. For me, I was up and down and kind of was always felt like I was on eggshells a little bit while I was there. Did you feel settled at any point in that first year? Like I am an NHLer, or was there a moment in time where you felt like, yeah, I've made it, I'm one of them?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I don't know if comfortable is the right word. You were always kind of a little worried until they told you to go find a place. So those first couple months, you don't know. You're in the hotel. You're hoping you're going to stay, but you're not 100% sure. So probably the first couple months. But once you get a couple goals and you're playing good, you kind of, for me anyway, I settled in. I was fortunate, didn't get scratched a lot. I think my first year I maybe got scratched for a couple, 3 or 4 games. So that also helps too. If you're playing and you're in the lineup nightly, it's a different story. But yeah, luckily I didn't spend a ton of time in the press box, so that probably made things a lot more comfortable for me and right. Be able to go out and play my game.
Who was your first fight?
That's a good question. I don't even remember. I know that's a great. I should probably know that, but
that's all right.
I don't even. I
thought you would remember that. How about the first goal? Who was that on?
I scored that in Montreal. I remember that one. I think it was it was my specialty. I think it was about 8 inches from the goal line, and I shoveled it in. So but it was to score a goal in Montreal it was pretty special. It was puck was laying there, shot from the point, came in, shoveled it in, and the rest was history.
That's awesome. Who was in net?
Jeff Hackett.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Yeah,
that's great. Was there any awestruck moments for you? Like I remember I got to play on my birthday, my 21st birthday, I think, in Pittsburgh against Mario, who was like my idol of all time, right? Growing up, I worshiped that guy, and so for me, there was a couple moments like that in my first year playing against Gretzky at Madison Square Garden was crazy. Was there any moments like whether a fight or playing against one of your heroes that was pretty surreal?
Oh, for sure. Like same thing, like Mario and Yager, and like you watch those guys come into Calgary and just how good they were, and it was. You're sitting on the bench and just in awe of those guys, and taking a couple face-offs against Gretzky in Madison Square Garden, like just unreal experiences when you're a young kid and you grow up watching those guys on TV, and to be able to go out there and be on the same ice as the best hockey player to ever play was pretty special. But probably same as you, those two guys, like. Yeah. Those were the guys growing up in the 80s and early 90s that were, they were gods.
Yeah. What's the biggest difference for you, in your opinion, of like the pro game and even the junior game? Like I talk to players about, trying to think about maybe what the standards are where you're not yet, like, so, okay, if you're U13 and you're playing well, like our younger kids, you're going to be going to Bantam next year, and you're going to be playing with these bigger, stronger guys. Like, how do we maybe think or train or try to prepare ourselves for that next level, and then not having to adjust as much once we're there? Do you feel that there was like a transition from your time, whether even to be in the minors to being an NHLer, and what that routine and standard was like compared to other times in your career?
Yeah, I think there's a huge jump from the AHL to the NHL, but you almost, I don't want to say, you almost find it easier because everybody's in position, everybody knows exactly what they're doing, so it's, the actual structure of the game in the NHL I found easier than in the AHL, where it's a little more all over the place, because you've got guys that are, still learning the pro game and et cetera. But just the skill level in the NHL from the AHL was just a huge adjustment. You're out there playing against, like we said earlier, like Mario, who dominates the game with his size and skill, and if he wants the puck, he has the puck as long as he wants it, essentially. Like there's so just to try to find ways to play against players of that skill level was a huge adjustment.
How are your habits like away from the ice? There's tons of details, of course, to the game that allow you to play as many games as you did. But what was that like for some of my listeners out there? Just being an NHLer, like how? It was a bit of a different era, of course. Like I think these guys are even more dialed than we were back in the day. But there was definitely a commitment and a process the guys were looking after.
Yeah, for sure, different era. Like late 90s, we were doing a lot of things that these guys wouldn't be doing, but you still, you watched what you ate, you tried to stay healthy, you tried to, eat healthy and stay in as best shape as you can. It's, it's impossible to play in the NHL if you're out of shape. It just doesn't work. So, we probably didn't maybe have as many protein drinks as the guys do these days, but guys were still taking care of themselves and trying to eat healthy and try to limit their beer and chicken wing intake. So didn't always work.
How did your training evolve throughout your career? You played up till 2010. That was really when I think that the physical side of the game was really starting to like, okay, this is a big deal, right? Like the training really does matter. How you train matters, the way you train, the frequency, all this stuff. I think like we were inundated at the pro level with really a culture change from the 80s right through the 90s and the early 2000s. And now I think it's even like that development thing has even jumped now into the psychology side of it and the mental side of it. I think, I mean, guys are even now exploring that frontier, the mental frontier. But as far as the physical realm is concerned, like how did your regimen change from, you know, first year 98, 99 to maybe 10 years later there when you're leaving the game?
Yeah, in Calgary we were, well, I'm sure you did the same with Florida, but like they would bring us into town for a month of the summer, and we'd all work out together, and you know, they try to show us as many things as they could to take home and continue to train with. So, yeah, as a young guy, you know, having some guy like a Ginla around who was also, you know, he's a year younger than me, but he was just he was next level in the gym working out. The way he took care of himself back in even the late 90s would be comparable to what these kids do today. So yeah, to have somebody like that around your same age and just watch what he did. So yeah, going in the summer and working out in Calgary for 3 weeks and then to play there and stay there in the summer and work out with the strength coach was huge. Because if you're not in a group, if you're not, it's, in my opinion, it's too tough to do by yourself. So fortunately, like there was a big group of us that stayed there in Calgary. So, you know, we'd meet 5 days a week and work out in the morning. So it was good to have that group around.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember like in Florida, you bring up Florida, and I would assume this has changed, but like one of the big tests of camp was this cardio test, which was either a 20-mile bike ride or a 5-mile run. Like you got to choose which one. I just kind of laugh at that now because although that is, you know, your aerobic capacity is a good precursor. Like I don't think any NHL teams are doing like long form endurance testing right now. You know, like it's kind of, I think the game has evolved a little bit past that. But one of the things that I think they've gotten away from, I don't know how you feel about this, but like we spent a lot of time on the bike, like the stationary bike, right? Like there's a lot of training around that and leg strength and everything else, whether it be sprint testing or whatever the case may be. And I don't see many guys doing it anymore. And I just think that was like, I don't know. I thought it was great for the legs. I thought it was a great connection to skating and maintaining that, you know, that strong lower base. And anyways, and I don't see them doing that now. Did you spend a lot of time on the bike when you were going through it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like a ton of time on the stationary bike. Like obviously did sprints and hill sprints, but a lot of time on the bike. And I think luckily in Calgary, we did a lot of stuff at, you know, the Olympic Oval. So our tests were never anything like that, the 5-mile run or yeah. We did more testing that was based off of kind of what the Olympic athletes were doing. So I think at that time our hard bike was a 2.5-minute bike ride where they kind of calculated and they kept upping the watts until you basically couldn't move anymore. So I think Calgary at that time was paying attention to what the Olympic athletes were doing and trying to do testing that was more based along that lines.
How do you feel from a younger player development standpoint now? Like, I mean, you said your youngest is a 2012. Do you have your guy in the gym? Do you have them working out off the ice when it comes to, you know, either trying to just be a better athlete or trying to be a better hockey player? Do you think that's something to incorporate? And if so, when would be a good time?
Yeah, the younger guy, not much. He did obviously power skating and skills stuff he does, but he'll be going into first year U15. So this year we'll start putting him in with a group to train. I think it's important when you get to that age to learn how to do it right and do it consistently. Because U13 to U15, I think it's a huge jump. That those years there when you're when you're a first year U15 kid compared to some of those second year U15 kids, like there's a big gap there. Like those guys that are second years that are going into their draft year, like there's lots of guys that are 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. So I think those first year kids have to spend some time in the gym and be ready to go when they get to training camp or tryouts, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's a big age span. Especially, I was noticed your birthday. So you're October 24th. That's a late birthday. You got an extra year in the draft because of that. That's like the only time where I would deem it as an advantage. Like, how do you speak to that just from your own personal like experience being a guy that everyone else in your birth class had 10 months on, or essentially a head start on? I think that makes a big difference at those ages.
100%. I heard something the other day about, I don't know the exact number, but the majority of kids drafted in the WHL are drafted like they're born in that first 4 or 5 months. Like it's I don't know the exact number, but it's it's something like 70%, because when you're unless you're an early developing kid that's born late in the year, like that is a huge gap. Like 10 months, January 1st, those kids have a huge advantage at a young age to kids that are born in October, November, and December. So I don't know if there's a good answer for what those kids can do other than
well, you did it though, hey? So like what was your experience with that? Did you feel like, were you physically later to the party than other guys, or was that not as much of an issue for you in your development path?
No, I was fortunate. I grew early. So essentially when I was playing U18, I was 6 feet tall and 185 pounds. So it was, that side of things, I was lucky that I developed earlier. So it wasn't an issue for me, but like I said, when I was 16 playing for the Blades, I was kind of the same size as I was 3 years later.
Yeah, for the smaller players out there, it's like it can be an advantage. I want players to look at it that way, because I think any environment or any event, it's how you perceive it. Is what the actual thing is. The meaning's going to be. And if you are a smaller player, then just find other ways to be successful, right? Like I had Duncan Keith on the other day, and he was just talking about that, because he was a smaller player, and he just had to find other ways to be valuable, right? And other ways to win a battle in the corner, or other ways to be able to move pucks instead of skating pucks past people. So I do think that if you learn some of those skill sets due to your size inadequacy, it can actually maybe even give you an advantage once you do catch up when it comes to the physical aspect, because you've learned different aspects of the game that maybe some of these early matures haven't had to adopt.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that it's all, everybody's different, so you need to find ways to benefit your game. And if you're a smaller guy, then you need to find ways that you can be successful and contribute to your team and help yourself get better. And then if you're a bigger kid, same thing. You need to use your size to your advantage and find ways to be successful in that. It's I think a huge part of it is just the mindset on finding ways that you can make yourself a better player. There's tons of options out there, and there's tons of things that you can do to make yourself a better player. It's just being willing to do it and being open to different things.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice there. And actually, you know what? I did a deep dive on that draft. So not to like prove like that your number was wrong there, but I actually did it, because I have one kid that, I was a February birthday, and then I have two of my kids are late birthdays, and I was just like, especially with the Bantam draft being right like a year before it has to be, when all these kids are still growing, right? It makes the job on the scouts so much harder. So I was like, okay, where do these kids get drafted? Because technically speaking, right, like if everything was equal and the year is split up into 4 quarters, right, 3 months, January, February, March, and so on and so forth, you would think there'd be equal representation, right? 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%.
Yeah.
So I ran all the numbers. I did it for two draft years, two draft years, and it was almost the exact same. So the second and third quadrant, whatever months those would be. So, April, May, June, and the other one, they had 25%, almost exactly 25% of the draft. But the difference was on the fronts and backs. So the last quadrant, October, November, December, only had 10% representation from that quarter, and that entire quadrant went to the first quarter, right? So like if they were supposed to have 25%, they had 35-40% like of the draft was in that first 3 months, and it fell off on the back three. So well, what does that say? All that says is, like, to me, they can't be less skilled. There's not less hockey players born there, all the rest of it. It's just that they're not as old. They're not as developed.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. It's a bit unfortunate, but there's always a pathway for those guys. If you don't get drafted, and if you're from the West early, it doesn't mean that the road's over by any means. And I think that's where kind of the passion of it comes in. If you just keep playing, and you never know what's going to happen. But I feel bad for those scouts and the players, because trying to guess what a 14-year-old is going to be at 18 is pretty hard. It's hard enough at the NHL when you're trying to figure out what an 18-year-old is going to be right as a pro. Definitely an imperfect science.
No, exactly. And I'm not surprised that those are the numbers that the way it shakes out, because those kids in the last 3 months they're just younger.
Yeah.
You're 8, 9, 10 months younger than some guys. So that's a huge amount of development at 13, 14 years old.
Yeah. If you could just pause time, I've always thought that, and like everyone else just goes like freezer mode, and then like give this kid 10 months to catch up. Like, you're going to see a very, very different player. You see it in all of our kids. What happens in 10 months, it's an eternity. So anyways, well, we're at our hour mark. I told you I'd keep you for an hour, so I really appreciate the time. Clarky, it's good to celebrate your journey there. And we didn't even touch on you going overseas and as long as you played, but I think we did. We touched on a lot of topics, and I think that my listeners are going to appreciate the stories you told. So thanks for showing up.
No, awesome. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for being here for the entire episode with Clark. Always great to connect with somebody that you used to battle with, and someone that you share, kind of an era of. We both experienced the game back in the 90s and trying to get into the league in the 90s and early 2000s, where you don't have to be much of a hockey historian to know how tough the league was and how hard it was to get in there. And Clark did get in, and I think that's awesome that he was able to recognize that. The coaches he had really supported his style and his advancement to the NHL level. Clark was a heck of in his way, right? Not in a Frank Banham way. He was a skilled player. He had skills that other guys don't have, and he had the hands that were good enough to put the puck in the net. And but he might not have been a player for another style of coach potentially. If he was in another organization. And that's one of the crazy things about hockey, is that where you are really matters. And one of the things that I love working with players on is, like, despite where you are, what can you do to make yourself valuable? Maybe to a coach that your style of play isn't naturally conducive to something that he is drawn to. There is things that we can do, and instead of throwing our hands up in the air like potentially maybe I did a couple times, there are ways to get involved in that. There are ways to take ownership of it. There are ways to take accountability for that, and to help yourself have the best opportunity available. But for Clark, he went from Bill Stewart to Sutter, and both of those coaches really align with his style of play and his personality type, and off he went to the races. 455 games later, had a great NHL career, collecting an NHL pension, and now he's giving back to the game that gave him so much, and supporting his boys through it by volunteering his time to coach. So awesome to connect with Clark. I think there's lots of good lessons in there. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.